concours, that is our university exam. Yeah, for my entrance, and that was 2003, we had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 70% women, 30% men. Vienna, the first course, that was Cloud Computing Foundation. There were 60 students. I was the only woman in the class. I built the muscle. I built the muscle to see this as the benefit even, and that being unique in terms of you are the only woman that is like the CTO. Your language, your race, your skin, your accent, honestly, it doesn't matter to any conversation as long as you have your contribution, you are bold, and you have your impact. Become the role model if you cannot find the role model.
Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indi Gupta, and I'm your host. I am delighted to welcome Soodeh Farokhi to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. Soodeh has been a tech entrepreneur in 2 countries and continents, a startup advisor, and an advocate for diversity and inclusion in tech. She also did her PhD in a 3rd continent and country, and I'll mention those as we go along. Soodeh is currently a vice president of product at Nakisa, an enterprise software company based in Montreal. Before that, Soodeh was co-founder of C2RO, and until recently, outward-facing chief technology officer of C2RO. That company is Soodeh's baby, as she says. Its main product is, as she describes it, the Google Analytics of physical spaces using security cameras. And in just a few years since its founding in 2016, C2RO has over 23 employees and has raised over $6 million in equity and non-equity money. In fact, Soodeh started her entrepreneurial journey when she was just 27 in Iran and co-founded a service startup, a spin-off from Shahid Beheshti University, named Service-Oriented Enterprise Architecture Institute. Her work has been recognized with many awards. She was recognized as among the top 750 digital innovators worldwide by Databird Journal in 2018, as an innovator transforming the AI video analytics industry by SAP in 2021, and she's also been finalist of the Canadian Women Entrepreneurs National Award and the Young Quebec Entrepreneurs Provisional Award. Her work on diversity includes being a co-founder of the Women of MENA in Technology Montreal. We'll talk about that later. And Soodeh runs a wonderful blog, soodeh-farokhi.medium.com. I recommend you check it out if you can. Before coming to Canada, Soodeh did her PhD from the Technische Universität Wien, or Vienna Institute of Technology in Austria, where she graduated 2016. And she arrived in Vienna in 2011, before which she did her master's and bachelor's degrees in Iran from Shahid Beheshti University, got her master's in 2011, and then her bachelor's in 2008. She started her bachelor's in 2003, which is using our Gregorian calendar. In Iran, folks use the Solar Hijri calendar, and 2003 would be 1382. So interestingly, this year, 2021, counts as a very special year, which is the year 1400 in the Hijri calendar. All right, back to Soodeh. Soodeh married her bachelor classmate, who is still her closest friend, and she's a working mom and with a 3-year-old girl. Welcome, Soodeh, to the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast, and thank you for being willing to share your story and your journey with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Indy, for having me and for the very nice introduction. I'm delighted to talk to you today.
So you grew up in Iran in the 2000s and 1990s. That was when your childhood was spent, and maybe a sliver of the 1980s. Was there a defining experience that got you interested in math and science at a young age, or was the interest very organic for you as you grew older?
Mm-hmm. I think it was very organic. I have a brother that he is 1.5 years older than me, and we were always together, playing together. He was actually my role model in childhood, and I can't remember the time that we weren't thinking of anything else than math and physics from early years in childhood, and it was very natural for both of us to step into math and physics. That is like a particular major in high school in Iran, and I think the interest came from the fact that first of all, my family valued education really strongly, I would say, and also we have been living in a country that prize mainly two things, like engineers and doctors, like medical doctors, right? And maybe because of that bias in the mind of our parents as well as us, like inherited that. We were just kind of thinking of that would be a successful path for us. And I wasn't forced to math and physics, but it was like natural for me that I am good at it, so I need to go and pursue this major.
And your parents were accepting of your interest in science and math because, like you said, engineers and doctors are highly revered in Iran?
Absolutely. They were encouraging us. And again, not pushing us to this major, but, they were, it was very clear and very obvious for them that we would pick either, to become an engineer or to become a medical doctor. And the whole family that we have, even my sister that she's 9 years younger than me, she also stepped into math and physics. And, so it was like, I think naturally, first of all, I believe we were good at it. And then we were strongly interested. I remember vividly the time that I was actually solving math equations and problems as a hobby in between reading history and reading literature, like reading other courses in school that I was not probably so passionate about, as I just like have fun instead of going and playing, and like this, that I loved it. Maybe my interest is different now, but back then certainly math was number one thing for me to focus and work on and read.
And the early dabbling with math and physics, was it largely books, or were there opportunities in Iran for you to like tinker with experiments or kits or things like that?
Yeah, unfortunately not that much. So it was mainly books and through the education system. Even my exposure to something like Lego and, like the things that my child now is exposed, and I see how she can think, modular, and, like because I know the way that she's thinking now when she's playing. I was not actually having this opportunity back then. Maybe other families that they did. We were not that rich, so we were like my parents. They were both kind of working as the government clerks, so we weren't like that rich maybe to have fancy toys, I would say. So we were mainly playing with each other, with my brother, and when we step into school. We were good at it, so we were praised, and I think because of that we were just kind of get into it more and more, because it was our strength in a way.
So you mentioned school and education system. Tell us a little bit about that. What language was the school instruction in, especially science, math subjects?
Yeah, everything is in Farsi, Persian, of course. So the elementary school, previously for us, it was 5 years elementary school, then 3 years the middle one, and then 3 years high school, and then a pre-university that was like the 4th years at high school that you were passing at the same university. Now it's different. Now it's very similar to here in North America. Back then, the everything was in Farsi. The math and physics was taught in Farsi as well, and starting from grade 1, we had very, very light math. But when I see now here the education system, I think when people are migrating here, I see that the difference and the knowledge of kids that they raise with the elementary school and system in Iran is much higher than kids here in North America. That means that it was like more intense, I would say. And each grade of us was like much more probably educational material and heavy. And I'm not saying which one was better, but for us, I remember vividly that grade 4, for instance, that we were actually, it was very intense in math. And they were like saying, wow, what's the grade that you have? Because that's like, that means that how strong you are in math, because grade 4 is like, the math is like, has a next level, So, yeah, and then we didn't have physics in elementary. We had we had, but it wasn't like named like really physics. We were just reading more practical use cases that we can try. But then from the 3 years in between, we were having like physics and math separately in books.
When did you start learning English as a language, as a third language?
Correct. So Arabic was the second one that we started. I think in elementary school, if I remember correctly, we had a little bit of Arabic, but of course it was a religious system, so we were exposed to Arabic much earlier, right? But then English was it's so funny because the English that we learn is mainly very, very focused in grammar. So from day first, you need to just memorize words and remember grammar. And so you are a very good writer, I would say, in terms of, you write very correctly, very heavy grammar and things that maybe I have not even used now, and also words, but no speaking. No listening, like even our teacher was coming to the class and she was speaking full Farsi and teaching the English grammar, and asking us the word by word to memorize. This is grade 6 on that we started to expose by English. And then high school, certainly we had more advanced English. And then in university, you have the English that is related to your major. For instance, if you're computer science or computer engineering, you have an English that is more, the terminology and everything that you use in this major. It's special English that you use.
At what stage or what age did you really start speaking English conversationally, or where you needed to speak English conversationally?
Right. So certainly I also and my family realized that this is not going to go anywhere, the English that I learned in the school, right? And again, I was born and raised in a very small city in Iran. Abadeh was the name. It's south, very close to Shiraz, and maybe Shiraz, the brand of wine. Remember, you can remember that. That's the south of Iran. Is a very beautiful city. So, a long story short, the city was small, so we didn't have any particular organization that I could go to English class. Because if you were in Tehran at that time, certainly there were so many institutes that you could go. But I remember the first year that we had an English conversation in institute, and my parents encouraged me to go, and that was like the high school. So beginning of high school, I started to go to extra kind of organization that we had, for instance, from 7 to 9 p.m. that we had more conversation, and it was very focused on, speaking and listening skills versus grammar. And even that one was also still grammar, but the English, the teacher was speaking in English at least.
And was that typical for kids that age to in your generation back then to take these extra classes, or was it only a few?
I would say no. Like my brother didn't take it, or more on my classmates. I would say it was like out of 40, we were like 2-3 people that we were going, and that's it. But like the situation is very different these days, and this is like. Is similar to like as important as the primary education in Iran. But back then, especially in a small city, when the families are not very wealthy, and it was expensive. So I remember that the cost of it was big deal for my parents, and I'm really grateful that they made that investment.
Slightly different question. What age did you use your first computer, and when did you learn your first programming language?
I was thinking about it, Indy. It was interesting. So throughout the whole high school, I was very focused on passing the concours, that is our university exam, right? And because of that, we didn't have computer back then, by the way. So my brother passed concours and the university exam 1 year ahead of me, and my father bought a computer for him as a gift. So he actually moved to Tehran, and we have the computer in house for just my brother. So I was not allowed to use it, but it was there, so I could kind of maybe get permission and use it. But I was doing I was preparing myself for the university exam, and throughout that year, I was not even watching TV. I was not touching anything. I was not watching any film or anything because it was distracting me. And I had the computer, and I was so excited to honestly start working with it. But I hold myself, and the first time that I was like using it as like my own, it was after I was successfully passed the exam with a great grade, and then I kind of started to use it. This is 2003. So that's the first time that I started to use, but of course it wasn't programming at that time. and then I stepped and I got to computer engineering, and of course the first semester I started to start programming, and it was back then C actually that I started to program in C, because the class was C, and then next semester we started C++, and that was the first experience that I had.
So tell us a little bit about this university entrance exam. Is this an entrance exam for all the major universities in Iran, or does each university have its own entrance exam? And also, preparing for that, was it just the regular school curriculum that you had to study, or was it something else on the side you needed to do?
Mm-hmm. So for state university in Iran that are the best ones in terms of the quality of the prof and the overall people and students, yes, you need to pass the national-wide school exam. And then there's also one that are for private schools, private universities. This was for public and state universities, and it's extremely difficult and competitive. Like, I think I can just give you the number, but that at that time that I passed the exam, there were 1.5 million total applicants, and only 16.5% of them were admitted. And then have in mind, if you wanted to be at like top 5 public state universities, that all of them, they were in Tehran, and they, if you want to go, for instance, for computer engineering, you have to be at one of those. And of course, I wanted to be in Tehran because, they are the best universities. So I was among top 1 students that were admitted countrywide. And have in mind that I was from a small city. We didn't have any geographical weight. So I was not fit for Tehran. So I needed to actually do better versus a person that was living in Tehran, because the distance to university was closer. So, and I could go easier to Shiraz University, but, I wanted to go to one of the top 5 universities. So it was a really big deal. And that was like one of the achievements of my life, honestly. I was the number 1 female student in my city with for the rank that I received. And it was like, they put banners in the street with my name. So it was like a very big deal for the whole city.
You're a celebrity.
Yeah, at that time.
And then the choice of major, do you have a choice, or is the choice really depending on your rank in this exam?
Mm-hmm. So, and from high school, you either go to math and physics, or literature, or bio and science, right? So these three, each of them, they have separated exams. So so I was in math and physics, so I did the university national exam for the math and physics. And then there are a lot of other majors that you can go, including all the engineering, right? And of course, you are free to choose. You are free to choose the university and you are free to choose your major. But you need to rank it, and it's based on your rank that where you can, be admitted. So if you put, for instance, Sharif is the best university in Iran. If you put, computer engineering, right? These days, computer engineering is number one. Back then was the electronical engineering that was number one, kind of. So the number one in concours was going to electronical engineering in Sharif at that time. Now it's going to computer engineering, and that's actually an interesting phenomenon that's happening. So back then I knew that I don't want to go to mechanical engineering or electronical engineering, and based on my interest, I was picking computer engineering, and I didn't even started with Sharif. I started with a few other universities because I knew that I cannot get to Sharif, and I got to Shahid Beheshti. That is actually one of the top five in Iran, and I was like so excited.
So you have to kind of guess which university you might get into the major.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big deal. There are statistics. There are people that you can go and and consult with them. All this year, based on all the things that's happening, number of applicants and the number of seats, you probably gonna. So I knew that I'll get to this because based on all of the analysis that I've done beforehand. So I knew that so it wasn't kind of a big deal or a surprise for me that I got admitted to Shahid Beheshti.
Usually when there is a very competitive exam for universities, an economy of coaching centers or training centers builds up around this. Was that also the case back then, that students would go, apart from their school, they would go to these coaching centers to train for this exam?
I think it's a very big deal these days. And it's also very dependent on where you are living. Like if you are in a large city or a small city. At my time, we didn't have actually money to spend in extra coaching schools or tutor or so. So my father, I remember, came to me and my brother 1 year before. My brother was actually doing the exam and said, you know what, we are not very rich, so we cannot you cannot go to any private school, private university, and we cannot have also extra services for you guys. So you need to just do your best, study well, and go wherever you deserve. And that was very clear from us, from top down, that we have to just do our best.
Work hard.
Yeah, but this is for university, for the bachelor. For master, it was a little bit different. So when I did the master, because it was 3 months study, so it wasn't a whole year or couple of years. It was competitive, but because we were in a very good university already, we had a lot of good material and knowledge, so we didn't need to maybe work that hard as I did in the previous one, and it wasn't that much competitive. But we did use the kind of not the coaching school, but more the exams, that they are very similar to let's say the entrance exam, and that was very helpful because you get familiar with the atmosphere and the type of questions, the timing, because timing is a big deal when you do the national exam. So you need to solve the issue, the math problems in seconds. So you don't have that much of time.
Right. So now coming to your college years, you're in Shahid Beheshti University, and are there a lot of women in your program, or are you one of the few women there?
For the university, you mean, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the schools in Iran are unisex, so we don't have. We were totally separated from boys up to university. So and then in university, yes, it's mixed, and for my entrance, and that was 2003. We had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 70% women, 30% men. So
Wow.
we were dominated, and I was not even thinking of, well, this might not be a major for for male. This was like ours. But of course, computer engineering is perceived to be more kind of female friendly, I would say, versus other engineering majors like
Why is that?
especially software engineering. I think it's also the workforce. If you consider the workforce and where you work, for instance, for the mechanical engineering, you have to go to a lot of factories and plants, and then it might not be very suitable for women, at least for the workforce in Iran. And electronic engineering, it's perceived to be extremely difficult in terms of and I think that's kind of maybe is a little bit, at least from my point of, I wasn't that much interested, but also it was like a little bit too much intense years of a study, and at the end I was not sure what would be the future for that major for a woman in Iran. So computer engineering, you could go to a lot of software companies that at that time it was also a good market. And then the courses, you don't need to go to lab, the particular labs that are, maybe you don't consider them female friendly in terms of the, atmosphere. Overall, the culture is male dominated, but, this one in particular was female friendly.
So 70% women is a very large fraction. That's not anything that we see in North America or even in Europe. The women who went into software engineering in Iran with you, did they eventually go on to jobs? I mean, did they have careers, or was it just a degree? What is your experience from people that you know?
Yeah, I think it's also very depends on the university that you did your major. For our university, because they were like quite good students that they could get to that university. Actually is unfortunate to say the majority of them are actually now here. Either they are PhD graduates or working in top best software companies in the world in North America or Europe or Australia. So they migrated, right? So and then yes, all of them, majority of them, I think maybe above 80-90% of them are working in the STEM field. So they stay in the STEM field because all the benefits that women get in the STEM field, higher salary, better status, job opportunities, and so forth. And even in Iran, yes, the job opportunities for women are really good for STEM, especially software engineering, I would say. So yes, they stay. But in private school is a bit different. So private school, when you are rich and you just go for having that major, I think my at least observation was that it's not the case always that they stay in that field because they just wanted the status of it, right? So it's a different perspective, but I don't have that perspective, so I cannot comment on it that much.
This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Soodeh Farokhi, entrepreneur and founder of AI startup C2RO in Canada. Now let's talk about your initiation into entrepreneurship. So you started your first company at age 27, and this was while you were at the university. This was the Service-Oriented Enterprise Architecture Institute. Tell us a little bit about how that started, and was it a group of individuals, including you, doing it, or were faculty involved, or what was the initial process like?
Let me get back to my bachelor. So 2003, 2008, I finished my bachelor. So it was 5 years intense study. I couldn't work, and I even didn't think that time that I can work in parallel, because like bachelor semesters are really heavy, and then you need a degree to start going and exploring job opportunities. So beginning of my master, while I step into master, I started to work in telecommunication space in a company, And so in parallel, I was finishing my master and I was studying, and I was working the first time, and it was excellent opportunity and also very challenging, as a woman stepping into workforce in STEM. And of course, the workforce was male dominated. We were in a private company, and the quality of colleagues in terms of the education was really high. But still, I was like feeling the pressure, and that, that's kind of more male around the table in a meeting and so forth. 2008 to 2011, I was working at that company. I was actually working with my husband at the same company and the same group. I was managing him at some point, etc. So there are a lot of back and forth in terms of, the strategies we kind of built together, and challenges that I faced because I was promoted to a product manager and team lead. So I was managing 7 engineers, all male, and I was pretty young, 25, 6 at that time. So a lot of things that I learned actually for my leadership at that time. And then it was like 4 years in that company. I was learning a lot, beginning of it. And then I stepped into my comfort zone when I feel, wow, I have a very good status. I had a good salary. I know what to do. It's very comfortable for me to go to work and, do what I'm very good at. And that is the time for me that I, as an individual and as an ambitious person, I push myself. I kind of push myself out of my comfort zone. And that was the time that I was finishing also the master. So I was like the latest years of the master. I had research on service-oriented architecture and enterprise architecture. That was like the research that I was working on. And there were like 3 other classmates / friends, including my husband, that we were working with the same prof, the same field, and we didn't have any idea of entrepreneurship, nothing. And we were just kind of, I would say, considered to be expert in that domain in Iran at that time, because SOA was a big deal in theory. And we were kind of thinking, oh, wow, how we can use this maybe in industry, because nobody is working on it in a commercial manner, right? And 4 of us came together at like a friendly gathering, and we thought, you know what, how about thinking of like making either a spin-off or industrial / research lab, we were calling it. And we work on projects, and we take projects from other enterprises, and we kind of try to establish this as we are the first one for the SOA in Iran, right? And we were interested, all of us, and we said, all right, so let's go to our prof. That was a well-known professor at the service-oriented, like the number 1, I would say, from Shahid Beheshti. And we said, we have this idea. Would you be able to support us, or what do you think? And he also got excited. He said, wow, this is a very nice idea. And he's very credible in the domain. So he said, I can sponsor you guys. So you start working on it. You establish it. I will provide the fund, and I'll provide you even the location, because you can work on, like, there is an office here. This is Shahid Beheshti University, right? And I quit my job. I quitted my job the week after, and all of the other folks, they said, we're gonna stay part-time, but I quitted my job, and I was like the one staying full-time in the lab, that office. And I got the equipment, I got the server, think of, okay, what would be the services we offer, the material we prepared, the website, like everything from ground up. We started to build the name, the branding, everything. And that feeling of, wow, you're creating something from scratch. You are building it on your own. The vision is yours. The way that you provide the services is your idea. And the way you deliver it, again, it's your plan. You go and talk to potential customers. And we were not thinking about money. And that's like the fundraising part of it was out. And it was a serious company. And I enjoyed it so much. And that was actually the first time that I felt that, wow, this is I'm entrepreneur in heart. And I was not thinking this is entrepreneurship, because I was not intending to be an entrepreneur or something. Like this was like by nature, and and this is 2012. So we were working on it. We were loving it. We were like having so much fun. 4 friends working in a company, and we had a lot of good exposure because we were the first one, right? We were getting great projects, very well paid job, and it was not comparable with the previous job, although we were so happy on the other one. But the other folks also joined us full time because the situation was going very well. We were getting a lot of projects. We couldn't handle it. We had meetings with very top-notch people in Iran, and they were like kind of talking about us in terms of the services that we offer. And that was the time, if I get back to politics, that was the time that Ahmadinejad got elected for the second time in Iran. Right. And then a little bit further, but then there were started to come some demonstrations. People weren't happy, including us. We were disappointed. And that was the time that, although everything was very good, these co-founders of us started to think of how about applying and going abroad.
Even though the company was doing fairly well.
The company was doing well. We had a beautiful life in Iran with my husband. We got married actually finishing our bachelor when we got the job that we could pay the rent, right? So we got married. We had a very nice friendship network in Iran. Everybody was still in Iran. It wasn't the case that people are like outside that much. And that we had some people that they applied and like they were doing their PhD at that time, even outside mainly US. But the majority of our classmates were staying there. We had a lot of fun gatherings, etc. So everything was perfect. Everything was great. And the company was doing very well. But that was the time that we started to think.
Yeah. So it was more the social instability and the economic instability that led you and your husband to think about leaving Iran rather than, just a company which seemed to be doing quite well at that point.
Absolutely. And I vividly remember my husband was the one that first time approached me and said, Soodeh, what if we think of going abroad? And I was like, so against it. I could not see myself leave Iran. Like it was hard for me to imagine that, because not that I'm very dependent to my family. I of course I love them, and it was very good to be close to them. But overall, the sense of belonging to your own country was very dominated for me. And but I started to think as well. I started to observe what would be the situation, what would be the opportunities, and what I'm going to miss maybe if I don't, and what's the ceiling here for me? What's like the cap of my dreams, the things that I can dream here versus going somewhere else, and that was 2012 that we started to apply, and we started applying. In particular, we focus on Europe, and that's the story of immigration started at that time.
Well, was there a reason you were looking predominantly at Europe for migrating?
My family, in particular, my father, was very much emotionally dependent on me, and he couldn't imagine to leave that far from me. And I actually kind of promised to him, said we're gonna go somewhere that we can get back to Iran in a couple of hours, and the time zone is so that you don't feel that we are in another country. And we were also probably not very risk tolerant people in a way, again considering our family, both of us with Amir. So we chose Europe for the first kind of step, and we're thinking of, all right, we go there, we do the PhD. It's full funded when I got the admission as a scholarship. So it's very little risk, and we're gonna explore the living abroad. And while we are not that much kind of putting so much pressure on our family in terms of that we have left and we cannot return back to Iran, like the all the problems that unfortunately the folks living in the US feel, that they usually don't risk it to leave the country and see their parents. So that was very difficult for us. So that was the reason mainly.
So now you've moved in 2012 to Vienna, Austria, and this was with your husband, right? At that time.
Yes, both of us. This is January 2013, and we already have the full scholarship. I have the full scholarship and admission, and for Amir, we were thinking either he would do the PhD there or he would work, because we had the opportunity of both. So he got the open work permit in Vienna. So we were thinking what would be a good approach for our family.
And so once you moved to Austria, Vienna, this is a completely different land, different way of living. What were some of the hardest things you had to do to adapt to the new way of life?
The very obvious thing was weather, because we got there in January.
Yes.
And although we bought very good shoes and a jacket, but the winter in Vienna gets to minus 10 or maximum like minus 15, but it's typically minus 10. And we couldn't stand it with what we have. And that was number one. So we need to really kind of equip ourselves with new shoes and new jacket. That was costly in our view, and also we had just one salary at that time, the scholarship kind of for the whole family, because Amir was looking for a job. The other one was because of the difference between our this is funny, but I want to mention it, because the currency of our country and the euro was like so much different. It was hard initially to go to school, to go to a supermarket and buy, tomato for €2. Right? And then when you were calculating it, it was like a big deal. And I remember that the early days that I was calling my mom and was like saying, you know what, I probably want to buy something here and you just post it to me, because it's doesn't make sense. And then that was another one. I think the hijab and so forth, I'm not a religious person, but that was not that hard for me. So that was like the adoption was typical in my view. Another things that I considered was strange was the number of women in the university in computer science, and believe me that I went to the first course, that was Cloud Computing Foundation. There were 60 students. I was the only woman in the class. And I was like saying, wow, isn't it here Europe? And I came from Iran, and so that was very strange for me. And I needed to work on myself, because there were projects that we need to do with the students, with other folks, and everybody was a boy, right? And it was a different dynamics. And first of all, English wasn't my first language, so that barrier in doing a project. And then second of all, working with all male, that was okay in terms of not any perception, but just feeling that you are not probably belonging to this crew, right?
Did that did that feeling go away after a while, or is that still there? Because it's still, the tech field is still very male dominated.
Right. I think, I built the muscle. I built the muscle to see this as the benefit even, and that being unique in terms of you are the only woman that is like the CTO. You are the only woman that is like the tech lead. You are the only woman that is like in the conference and speaking about cloud computing, and the only researcher in cloud computing that's a female. Of course, it was very difficult initially, but throughout my journey, I learned how to overcome it and actually use it as a benefit than fear. And that took a lot of time and work, but no, I don't feel it now. I feel other things. Now I'm a young executive, let's say in a boardroom of not just male, but it's like very experienced, and I would say old gray hair white male. So it's a different dynamics in business that I think we can get to it, but different feelings.
But I guess the lesson that I'm hearing is, even if you stand out in a group, maybe you're the only woman, maybe you're the only African American in a group, if you can take advantage of you being unique and reflect your experiences in whatever you happen to be doing there, that is a good strategy to have.
Absolutely. My belief is that that your language, your race, your skin, your accent, honestly, doesn't matter to any conversation as long as you have your contribution, you are bold, and you have your impact. Nobody gonna question impact. Nobody gonna question the contribution. And there is bias that you cannot control. And what I do for that is just that I prepared myself more. I need to work harder for the preparation, because if I go to a meeting and I'm unique, I will be spotlighted. And if I use that stage, it's gonna be very good for me. So I need to be prepared to use it and change the stereotype and change the bias in a way that, this is the different, and become the role model if you cannot find the role model.
It's very beautifully put. So returning to your timeline, so you're 2013, you go to Vienna for your PhD, and then you finish your PhD around 2016. During this time, as you're doing your PhD, are you still thinking, I'm missing that experience of being an entrepreneur, or, because you're doing research and, this is a very different kind of work where you publish papers, you think about innovative ideas. Are you already missing entrepreneurship, or what was your thinking going forward?
Yeah, it's funny. From the first that I started my PhD, I went to my advisor and said, look, I'm not an academic person. No perception, nothing for academia, and I really fully respect that path. But I'm not that type. And I want to learn about cloud computing because I'm an entrepreneur and I want to launch my tech startup in this field. And I want to learn it in a practical manner. And I don't want to do theoretical research in my PhD. I want to do fully practical. It's very hard. I know that because like the experiment, you know it yourself. The experiment of a practical research is so much different than theoretical and simulation. But I picked that path because I wanted to build the next startup. And that was actually, I knew the timeline. I want to finish my PhD in 3 years because I want to move on and start working on it. And I was actually exposing myself into the startup ecosystem in Vienna. I was not sure to stay in Vienna afterwards. We were exploring other countries, but even in parallel to my PhD, I was exploring, I was going to some camp that was like more like how to do the spin-off from your research, etc. And I was exposing myself to understand the entrepreneurship because I experienced it in a way more randomly. And now I knew that I'm an entrepreneur and I want to build not a service startup, this time a product startup.
So as you were finishing your PhD in 2016 and you're considering your options of what next to do, did you consider staying in Europe or going back to Iran? What were the choices you were looking at then?
Going back to Iran was out of options in a way of it was funny. My parents visited us once in Vienna, and my father came to me and said, Soodeh, and I know and that I told you that you have to return back. Have to means like it would be we highly appreciate if you return back after your PhD. It's not valid anymore. I think you have a beautiful life here. Stay here. We're gonna visit you often, and we also enjoy it. So that was like a relief from my father, at least, that I know that I'm not hurting his emotion, and that was really a good milestone for me to achieve. No, Iran, turning back to Iran, unfortunately, wasn't at all in our kind of option pool. Vienna on its own was really good. The quality of life was excellent, but we felt that the speed of life and progress, I would say, in Europe was a bit slower than our desire and our preference. And with Amir, we started to think of what would be a good place to go that you feel home as a second home, and the speed is good enough for us to progress, especially in the age that we are, and we want to jump and have our ambitious career path ahead. So Canada was certainly in the options. UK as well. UK was also another option, and I was exploring. US wasn't because of the situation that I couldn't feel and I couldn't think of going in a country, and I cannot have the ability to return back to Iran whenever I want. Right. So Canada and UK were the locations that I started to explore. How can I launch a startup in these two countries?
And it certainly sounds like your dad letting you go a little bit, letting you, the expectations that he had from you of you ought to be able to come back in just a couple of hours, just relaxing those. I think that certainly sounds like that helped you. You're listening to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Soodeh Farokhi, entrepreneur and founder of AI startup C2RO in Canada. Can you contrast your experience of starting C2RO in Canada with your experience of starting your company back in Iran? What were the harder things about doing it in Canada, and what were the harder things about doing it in Iran?
Interesting question. I would say in Iran, because I was not thinking that this is like a startup and we are like founders and we need fund and etc. It was like and we were, I would say, much more immature. We were 27, and we're not thinking of any fund and like what's the are we owning it, like what the cap table, the shareholder, like nothing. And we were not even asking the right question that we should have asked at that time. So my experience was purely passion and energy and excitement for building and, launching a new thing. And that's it. So it wasn't around the financial side of it. Would it be, of course we were thinking that would it be successful or not, but it was like in a different, I was in a different mindset. But And I was not targeting, the way that what would be the right way of doing it. I was just trying it in a way. But based on that experience and doing service, I realized that I actually want to build something and grow it. I don't want to just sell it like as a service and then all of a sudden start over. And that was like the idea of, all right, I want a product company. I want a high-tech company. I want this domain. And I want to do it right. I want to build it in a way that has less risk of failure. So my experience in Canada, I was very aware of entrepreneurship. I was very much knowing what I need to do and what are the obstacles actually in a way, because I was educating myself in Vienna about entrepreneurship. And I had a lot of skills that I learned throughout my PhD that I use very well in the entrepreneurship journey back in Canada. And I didn't have it before. And that was really helpful. So the experience, I think, I could say I cannot quite compare them, because the frame of mindset for me was very different. And the awareness of what I'm doing was very different. And here in Canada, I exactly know I went through an incubator. I got $500,000 very soon. And then I had the real money, real investors. We had a cap table. I was, accountable for the success of the company. So, and amazing feeling, very rewarding. And the level of challenge was extremely higher than the previous experience that I had.
In the incubator that you were in, were the other entrepreneurs, were they also immigrants, or was it largely native born Canadians there? How did that, do you feel like you were a minority as an immigrant? Certainly you were a minority as a woman, but were you also a minority as an immigrant? What was that feeling like?
Canada, it's very diverse, I would say, generally, right?
Yeah.
And in this particular incubator that I stepped in, they had a vision of building diverse companies, and that was very beautiful. And mainly, I think out of 3 startups, we were in cohort, so it's like we had probably 6 in parallel that went through that cohort with me as like projects, they were calling it, that can be incubated and they can invest. And the team was diverse. I think we were not majority, but there were a few strong entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs there. So I, from the time that I stepped into Canada, starting with this incubator, I really didn't think and perceive that I'm minority in terms of the gender. But then when I grow my team and build my team and wanted to hire diverse talents, I felt that, well, there are not that many diverse talent in the pool. And then, then the whole process and the problems.
So recruiting is a challenge, especially if you want to recruit a diverse set of employees.
Absolutely, I would say. If you are thinking of junior roles, you have an easier time to find, because I think now, especially depends on the field, in the AI field here in Montreal, that is considered as a hub of AI, and there are a lot of women, and there are strong women, and I'm proud, to say that.
Right.
But when it comes to more business roles or managerial roles, extremely difficult to find. Extremely difficult to find higher level technical female in business, like CTOs that are female. That's like very rare.
You also co-founded this group, Women of MENA in Technology Montreal. Tell us a little bit about what led you to co-found the group and what the group does.
Yeah, so Women of MENA in Technology, that previously named Persian Women in Tech, actually, is a non-profit organization and community that was founded by Soodeh Nasiri, that's a very strong entrepreneur based in California. And the goal is that to build a community of technical women when they are like minority in terms of the racial background of them, right? So they were very focused in Persian women initially, but then they widened it up to Women of MENA. And I came to know Soodeh through social networking. I think I would say that I'm very good in networking, either virtually or in person, and that's very necessary actually for entrepreneurs. And I get to know her and her vision, and I really liked it. Then there were a couple of folks here. We were working the same incubator. We get together and said, there are a lot of women here and that are Persian at that time. And why not we build this community here? Because they have a global community, and each city can launch its own community, but they needed the minimum of 100 female, Persian technical female, to launch that chapter. And we actually started the Facebook group, and we said, you know what, we will do the networking, and I'm sure that we will find 100. And we found 130 female tech Persian female and tech people in the STEM field, and that registered to our group. And we kind of were validated by the headquarters that we can launch. So we were 4 people that we co-founded the Montreal chapter. And the first meeting that we had, it was like over 110, if I'm not mistaken, in person, all female, all Persian tech.
Yeah.
And that was such an empowering event. And we had Dr. Gina Cody, who is a very successful entrepreneur here in Montreal. And she actually donated to Concordia University, and there's a faculty named Gina Cody after her. She was the speaker, and she was very inspiring, and the event was amazing. And I was in that role and doing the executive. I was an executive team member as well for the next 2.5 years. And then I said, we need to give that space to other female, and there are a lot of stronger ones. And now they are leading this chapter. So I'm very proud of this initiative. I'm very in touch with the community and promoting it. It's not that it's for just Persian women. I think we need that community. And now I'm broadening my network to, Canadian women, to business women in the world. Like overall, I think the sense of community and belonging, it's a sense that I've missed it for years, and now I'm trying to, now that I have it and I don't have that, imposter syndrome and other aspects that's really dominated for women, I want to give it back to the community, and I want to be in such networking community and kind of empowering women if I can, talking panels and share my experiences and stories, and I think challenges, so that other women, maybe it resonated with other women, and they don't feel lonely in those situations.
Imposter syndrome is something that you mentioned that a lot of women deal with, and a lot of researchers and a lot of entrepreneurs deal with. Are there pieces of advice or rules of thumb you have?
I think initially I would say awareness is number one for overcoming it, because when I was feeling it, the feeling is like this, that you are somewhere that either other people don't appreciate that you deserve the place you are in terms of, the career path, or yourself, because you are the worst enemy of your success initially. If you don't go out of your own way, that's the hardest part to overcome. I think initially you need to figure out that there is this syndrome and you need to just realize that you are not alone feeling that. I think that was number one step for me, the realization and awareness. And then the way that I did that, the way that I realized that, but it was by reading books of about other female executives, entrepreneurs. For instance, I started to know Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, and I read her Lean In book, and I actually listened to audiobooks. So I listened to her audiobook with her voice, and I was like saying, oh my God, the CEO of Facebook feel that way in her career path, and I'm feeling the same in terms of this imposter syndrome and the challenges that she as a working mom she faced. And that was like a moment for me that I need to work on it. I need to be aware. I need to read about it. I need to see how I can strengthen my muscle in a way of what should I do, what I shouldn't do. For instance, being surrounded by people that empower you and really take the others, the people that depower you and give you negative energy out of your network. Like that is that as simple as this one. And talk to people, have mentor, be upfront about your feeling, realize those. And I think those are the things that I did. And of course, having a role model in a way of, seeing people, their challenges. We are all human at the end, right? So any successful female or male, like Jeff Bezos, like whoever that we can imagine, Elon Musk, like they are all at the end humans. They have a lot of challenges that if we see and if we hear the stories, we learn how to overcome challenges. And I think that was actually indeed the reason that I started my blog, because I was thinking of there are a lot of things that I had to overcome, but I was like experiencing it maybe for the first time, and I was not knowing about it like that other women or executives went through. Why not I shared it and then read the others? Sharing stories is very powerful.
Oftentimes, women in tech, but also in other fields, when they start a family, they feel like they have to choose between having a family and having children versus having a career. You have been successful in doing both. Do you have advice for women who are trying to do both, have a family and have a career in tech?
Very great question, because that's like I even get emotional when I think about it and think about the women that they need to choose between those. Because as an entrepreneur, as you mentioned initially, C2RO, the company, was my child. Right. So I was picking to have a real child or kind of abandoning my first one, because I knew that I have to go to maternity leave. I have to go through a process that anyhow it might not be my 100% in terms of the time commitment, at least. And that initial decision was so difficult. And have in mind that I have a super supportive husband.
Right.
Like I have a husband that we think everything should be equal in terms of parenting, and maybe just pregnancy was something that by nature we couldn't divide it. And the other rest, we were thinking of, okay, 6 months me, maternity leave, 6 months my husband. And it wasn't clear what will happen to my business, right? So, but when I started to think of having a family, and that was like a non-negotiable for me, then I realized, I need to put my family first. And this is certainly, it must be like this. The family first, the health first, and then the work, right? Especially we went all through pandemic, and we realized that I think even that feeling is stronger now in myself and probably for others. So the lesson that I learned was, first of all, be very clear with your boss, manager, about, when you want to announce it, you announce it, and have a very clear, empowered plan in terms of what you need to do, what you want to do. This, I think, impression that when women get pregnant, they must say goodbye to the workforce and they're going to be vanished. I changed that perspective to for the incubator and investors that they were at the table at our boardroom. Because the moment that they heard it, they were like panic. But then I gave them a plan, and I said, this is my plan, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to return back after 6 months. And even during the 6 months, this is the plan to stay connected. And then that was very successful. I returned back with the plan. Again, I was lucky. I'm living in Canada. The parental leave is very well organized. Yeah. You can have divided this period between you and your partner. So everything was like established for us in a way of doing that equal job. And then because my husband stayed with the kid for 6 months, of course he has a stronger bound and versus other husbands, right? Other fathers. Mm-hmm. And then when something happens, my kid just called both of us. And when there are like events that I need to attend, the business trips, I have no issue because my kid has a strong connection with her dad. And just imagine that if this doesn't happen from day first, this loop is function, right? And then what I did, again, returning back to the perception, I changed that perception because I got back. The plan was as I presented, and then there were 3 other women, if I'm not mistaken, after me, that they got pregnant, they were entrepreneur, they returned back, they talked to me, we shared the plan, and there were no panicking for the VCs anymore, especially that network of VCs that they knew us, because they said, well, this is a natural process, they go and return back. And I think if we start doing this in our network, in our bubble, just imagine that this perception gonna be changing, and we are the one that we need to be agents. I think we should not be passive as women, especially if we are in like managerial executive role, if we are leaders. I think we need to have an impact ourselves. We need to start and talk about it. Otherwise, we overcame it with a lot of challenges, but why we are not sharing it with other women that are suffering exactly the same issues?
That's very beautifully put, I think. I think you said that, I mean, changing the culture requires kind of changing the thinking of people as well. And I think what you're describing is a very active way to do that, while
Absolutely.
also, managing a family and also a career. And what you described, the way of planning the pause itself so that there is no panic on the other side. I think that was very, very beautifully put. Slightly different perspective question. So you did a PhD and then you went back to being an entrepreneur. Do you feel like the PhD or doing the PhD actually helped you be a better entrepreneur?
It's a question that I get a lot, Indy, and actually it's a very powerful question. I would say it helped me, not for the degree. The degree is good, you have a PhD there, but it's not like moving the dial. What it changed in me, I think there were a few bold characteristics that I can say it helped me be a better entrepreneur. Number 1 is how I manage uncertainty. In my view, the best entrepreneurs are the one that they can handle uncertainty and they can make a decision when they don't have enough input, when they don't have enough clarity of the situation. They need to make a call and go ahead. And then if the situation change and they figure out new information, they need to accept the problem, the issue, the failure, and they start over. That managing uncertainty for a PhD, for me, because I started my PhD, didn't have any topic, was very difficult for me to start building that topic. And I figured it out through collaboration with a few postdocs from other universities. And when I managed to understand what's the path for me to research, I was so successful in writing strong papers, proving very innovative ideas, and so forth. So number 1, managing uncertainty. I think that international networking and communication, it's not necessarily a characteristic of PhD students, but I did it well throughout the conferences that I went. And it's very nice that we actually met in conference, right? Yes. At, back to the PhD. You were the educator of course era that I passed, and I was so delighted that I met you in a conference. So that was just in parentheses. That presentation, I think it also helped me to be comfortable presenting to group of people that sometimes they were like over 100 at that time. That was like, you are young and you are presenting your idea and you are the expert in that field. Because you are an expert, you gain the confidence to speak about it, to present it, and that's also very important. And that the storytelling, what's the story of your PhD? What's the story of your research? Because you go to a networking event in a conference, right, and you are presenting and you need to, have like elevator pitch that we had in the startup world. Right. So I learned that as well there. And of course, all of it is English, right? Because my previous experience was totally in Persian, and it was like a different group of people, different mindset, etc. And then the another aspect that I wanna say was that the attitude of get things done on your own, and in a way started to kind of build self-motivation for finishing your work and go ahead, even if there are not that many milestones. but you build milestone through the conferences that you want to publish your papers, the deadlines that you need to meet, and the peer reviews that you receive, and you need to have your judgment on changing it. I think all of those help me also to kind of getting stronger in that attitude of get things done, have a good judgment, and improve my work. And of course, I focus on practical research versus theoretical. And that was also helpful for me because I was leading the R&D team for a very long period in my own company. And the initial part of it were coming from my own PhD research, because I knew that I need to be a credible researcher at that time. And I wanted to build a credible research team then at my own startup.
It almost sounds like you were able to use your time in the PhD program as a kind of a training ground to train yourself to kind of transition to the Western entrepreneurial world with, practicing presentation, practicing storytelling, practicing managing of conflicts, managing changes.
Absolutely. I certainly agree. And another aspect that was social, but I love traveling. And during the period that we were in Vienna, we traveled to so many countries, and especially it was very easy to travel in other European countries. And that also gave me perspective of diversity, the international friendship and connections, right, collaborations. And I think that's also very, very nice. Then when you come to Canada, that you have a lot of people at the table in a very diverse manner. I wasn't the one coming from Iran, with a very unified population and very isolated. I was coming from an experience and very diverse, and I read about a lot of countries. I saw a lot of countries. I took pictures of a lot of countries, and then I was meeting people here that are from those countries. I think that was also another aspect that helped me for the communication and the networking aspects of a startup.
Right. The next question is a little bit speculative, but I am going to ask it. So you grew up in Iran, but imagining a different world where maybe you grew up in Europe or Canada, or maybe even the US, do you think if you had grown up differently, if you had gone through the schooling system in Europe or Canada, you may have had a different kind of interest in computer science or in tech or in entrepreneurship?
Very interesting question. First of all, if I want to pick, I would not risk it, right? So because I'm not sure I'll get where I am today. Not to be arrogant, but I'm happy that I built the muscles to be strong enough to stay here today where I am. And I'm actually kind of, I would say, proud of my accomplishment. And I didn't know how to be proud of yourself, and I learned that lesson. But given my family and given I think the mindset that I built throughout my childhood, I think if I were living in another country, I would probably be the same person in terms of I'm a determined, kind of curious learner, etc., and entrepreneur. I would say that I love to build. And of course, in technology, I'm a technology savvy, but I'm not a nerd. I'm not a person that stay there for ever programming. And no offense to that person, absolutely beautiful, but I'm not such a person. So I think I am a computer scientist. Now I wouldn't call it scientist anymore. I'm more like an business person. But I have that background without being nerd. And I think even if I was growing in Europe or North America, that aspect was even less. Maybe the level of my technology savvy was a little bit lower because I was working on my other dimensions that right now I don't have, right? For instance, I love music, but I'm not playing an instrument. And I wish I could. I love sport, but I'm not an expert or, a professional person in any type of sport. I play tennis, etc., but this is like what I'm learning now, not because I'm very like single dimension as a as a person that grew up in a family that they were just valuing education, nothing more. So maybe the aspects that I could have been better was those aspects, I think, and those of course give you perspective, and I probably could go through a less bumpy ride to get to such a place maybe that I am today, than pathing such a very bumpy and challenging path and journey, and again staying here. So but still, you look at the journey. I'm not always I'm a person that don't look at the destination. I mainly look at the journey, and my journey was challenging, has been challenging, still is challenging. But I like it. It's rewarding, right?
Yeah.
So that is where I am, who I am. So again, I don't know if I could answer, but they are, I think, the other aspects of me. And I'm not sure it was with the price of being less savvy in technology or with the price of suffering less in a way.
Yeah, that's very beautifully put. I think the journey is more important or as important as the goal. Thank you, Soodeh, for being willing to join us on the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast, and thank you for being willing to share your story with us. I know there are multiple words that you tend to use for thank you in your languages. I believe the French word merci is still an accepted word as thank you. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's very common word. It was a great pleasure indeed. I really enjoyed the engaging conversation. Thank you very much for having me. And I hope the audience also enjoyed the conversation and learned some maybe practical insight in their career path. Thank you.
This was episode 10 of the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast. You've heard the immigration story of Soodeh Farokhi, entrepreneur and founder of AI startup C2RO in Montreal, Canada, and also entrepreneur in Iran and PhD along the way from Austria, and an immigrant from Iran. If you haven't already done so, please listen to the lead episode of this Middle East entrepreneur segment, that's episode 9, featuring both the narrators from the Middle East. Coming up the next episode, that's episode 11, is Fadil Adib, professor at MIT, who describes living through many wars in Lebanon, doing humanitarian work during his school years, and realizing that life in the US left him so much more time to do work. Stay tuned. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast.